Hello everyone and welcome back, Dace here. As some of you know, I recently included Shikhondo Soul Eater in my list of best themed shmups on Switch, and for good reason. With stunning artwork and mesmerizing bullet patterns, this game consistently turns heads. But of course we weren't covering the mechanics, story, how the game feels, and everything else in that video. While there are certainly loads of awesome bullet hell games out there, what blows me away is when a game gets better and better the deeper you dig into it, and that's exactly my experience with Shikhondo. After buckling down for some serious playtime, this title was screaming to be reviewed. So today we'll be taking an in-depth look at the Switch version of Shikhondo Soul Eater and everything it has to offer. With all that out of the way, let's get into this. Shikhondo is a vertical scrolling Korean bullet hell shooter for 1 to 2 players and is best known for its exquisite artwork and theme inspired by Asian mythology. The game was developed by Deer Farm and initially released on October 9th, 2017, with the Nintendo Switch version coming out on September 6th, 2018. There isn't much to the story, but spirits, also known as yokai, have broken free from limbo and are spreading fear and wickedness across the land. Countless souls are being stolen, and it's up to the player or players to wage war against these evil beings and free the souls from their endless torture. The game plays out over 5 stages filled with various enemies, and each level ends with a 2-phased boss fight. There are 2 female characters to choose from, Grim Reaper and the Girl. Both function in their own unique way, and as you might expect, will require somewhat different playstyles. Grim Reaper's standard attack is a spread shot, and when focusing, the entire assault is funneled straight ahead. The Girl differs from this quite a bit. Her standard shot fires straight ahead, while 2 orbs of light target nearby enemies. With no available targets, they will simply combine with the regular attack. The Girl's focus shot operates differently than in most shooters I've played, and I really came to appreciate this twist to the gameplay. Instead of her firepower funneling into a solid beam, the 2 orbs will leave her to find and lock onto targets. Once destroyed, they will jump to the next target as long as you're holding your focus. Furthermore, as in many STG and bullet hells, you will have reduced speed while using your focus shot, which can be helpful when navigating rough patches. We start the run with 4 lives and 4 bombs, or soul attack items as they're called. If you're in a pinch, you can fire off a soul attack to give yourself some breathing room like you would with a standard bomb. However, there's another side to these precious items, and this is where things get very interesting, but I'll touch more on that momentarily. Shikhondo includes a grazing mechanic where positioning yourself close to enemy projectiles will fill your soul gauge. Once full, a powerful attack can be unleashed while in a state known as the soul collect mode. I want to highlight that in most games with grazing mechanics, you're typically just hugging the edge of a bullet stream or a single projectile. Shikhondo feels different though. While you certainly have typical grazing experiences, there are plenty of moments where specific bullet formations leave openings for you to slot yourself into. It's like your hitbox is a dot, fitting into its place within an image or pattern, and once in position, you want to move with the formation for charging your gauge as much as possible before breaking away. Other times, when jumping up the screen from bullet to bullet, it feels like you're a fish climbing a waterfall, and I haven't experienced this feeling in any other bullet hell I've played, so it's a neat observation. If you have a soul attack in stock during this enhanced attack period, you may fire one off to enter a second, stronger soul attack phase and deal a considerable amount of extra damage in the process. As much as I love using bombs for more traditional purposes, I soon realized how valuable they are for surviving some of the more challenging boss fights. They essentially allow you to knock off huge chunks of health and end these exceedingly dangerous battles earlier than you would otherwise. There's an incredibly satisfying balance to experience and achieve between charging your soul gauge, weighing when to enter soul collect mode, and whether or not you want to let the first cycle drain or pop a soul attack before it runs out, netting you an additional bullet cancel but leaving you with 1 less bomb for later. At the end of each stage, you are given a choice between 1 extra life or 1 additional soul attack item. So if you find one or the other getting too low, you can top things up before proceeding. The game includes a healthy dose of different play modes and difficulties. From the main menu, we have Game Start, which I'll get to in a second, Option, which includes sound, music, and language settings, Ranking, which is the online leaderboard collection, and Credits. If selecting Game Start, we come to a menu consisting of Arcade Mode, Local Co-op, Boss Rush, Novice, Hardcore, and Customize. Each of these in turn offers easy, normal, hard, and extreme modes, so there's something for every skill level. If you're experienced and looking for a rush, check out Hardcore mode since you get 1 life, no continues, but your soul gauge will charge twice as fast. To be more specific, if taking a hit in hardcore mode, you can technically continue, but the mode appears to switch to normal, with your life stock topping up to 4. I haven't checked where your score would be recorded if choosing to continue, but I think in general if you're playing hardcore mode, you're playing with the intention of not continuing. As for customize mode, this is really fascinating because you can switch how the mechanics function. First, you are presented with a choice of graze or attack. If selecting graze, you charge the soul gauge normally. If choosing attack, you charge the gauge by killing enemies. Next, you are presented with a choice of bomb or gauge. If choosing bomb, you use the soul attack item as usual. If selecting gauge, however, you can charge a second soul gauge. Finally, you may choose between health points or count. Selecting health points means the soul gauge will not reset when 1 HP is lost, and soul attack tokens will not be restored. If going with count, you'll use lives. If a life is lost, the soul gauge will be reset and soul attack items will be restored. In any event, Shikhondo offers an astounding bundle of modes and difficulties, paving the way to boatloads of playtime, so be sure to experiment. The visuals in Shikhondo are nothing short of impressive. The art style alone is a breath of fresh air compared to many arcade shooters, with gorgeous backgrounds and bosses spanning the stages. Stage 1 begins in a dark and cloudy area teeming with enemies. Not long after this, we clear the shroud and find ourselves above a shrine-like village with floating islands, statues, trees, and lamplight glowing amidst the cool evening air. I've always really enjoyed how some portions of artwork, like the moving land islands, move independently over the main scrolling background. It's a nice touch as it adds depth to the already incredibly detailed scene stretching out before us. At first glance, it may appear as though the background art is repetitive, but if you follow along, you'll observe plenty of differences, providing a unique journey, as though you're actually strolling through the village below. It's not that you won't see some repetition thrown into the mix, but it's handled tastefully and evokes a sense of wonder. I often find myself scanning the backgrounds to see how many things I can discover for the first time while still maintaining focus on the actual gameplay. As we make our way up the mountain path, we eventually reach the boss, an innocent-looking young woman with a sweet smile, seemingly inviting us to let our guard down, and that's a huge part of Shikhondo's theme and overall expression. Each fight begins with a boss that isn't too alarming, yet that all takes a twisted and morbid turn during the second phase when their true form is revealed. For the Stage 1 boss, I love how we go from an attractive woman to a hacked-up, rotting nightmare. The way they deliver bosses in this game perfectly fits the dark underlying theme. If closely observing the background during the second half of the fight, you'll see numerous paper talismans lining the wooden support beams and walls. It's a significant clue revealing this demonic entity had been sealed here, unable to escape but patiently waiting for some unfortunate soul to wander in without realizing the danger, or that someone else had tried to contain this evil presence after it escaped from limbo but failed. Either way, this detail is a prime example of how they masterfully combine the dark and insidious nature of the bosses and theme with the stunning artwork and everything held within. In Stage 2, we find ourselves flying over narrow sections of floating land heaped with gazebos, trees, and butterflies. One interesting observation is the use of zooming in and out at a gradual pace. This effect creates a feeling of our combat being drawn closer to the treetops, while other times the skirmishes move to slightly higher regions of the sky. The Stage 2 boss fight is against Chang Kui, one of the few boss names I've come across so far. This battle occurs in an enchanting area with trees, a wooden walking bridge, and paper lanterns suspended between the branches. From our first exposure to the boss, we can gather that something isn't quite right since she's upside down, possesses multiple arms, and has the legs and tail of a tiger, not including the feet. This is only the beginning though, as we soon discover how deep this corrupt fusion runs. When her second form triggers, we see multiple mangled human heads protruding from below a tiger's head, and her mouth twists into a ghastly line of sharp teeth. After a bit of research, I discovered the Korean myth linked to this boss. Whenever a tiger kills someone, they become a yokai connected to the tiger's chin, cheekbones, and armpits. They can only escape if enticing a living soul into the tiger's deadly path so that they also become victims. Stage 3 takes place over a village tucked away in the cliffs with sections of crumbling stone walls and other damaged structures lining the area. I like the pacing here because we get a taste of the destruction the yokai are unleashing as they move across the land. The Stage 3 boss is a skin-crawling combination of a human woman and a spider, and the fight takes place in a stone-tiled chamber covered in cobwebs. One thing I really enjoy about this boss is how some of the attacks actually feel like a spiderweb is being spun. In most shooters, attacks often feel neutral in their appearance, movement, and association. Shikhondo, on the other hand, shines brightly in this area because we can all relate to spiders and how they weave webs, which immediately becomes more engaging as a player because we see our association expressed so wonderfully. Even without knowing what the boss looks like, it's not a far stretch to imagine what kind of creature would produce attacks like this, and that kind of creativity is sorely missing in many games. During the second phase of the fight, the boss transforms with the spider legs replaced by multiple human legs and 4 red eyes on her face. I think the cool, watery colors in this chamber look fantastic and convey the idea of being down in a musty cellar where you would certainly find this kind of creature. In stage 4, we travel over the top of a charming region filled with bridges, trees, bending stairwells, and more destruction as giant hands and heads come out of the ground in the background art. 2 of my favorite things about this setting are the mice on the bridge and the toad holding the umbrella. The boss in this stage is a multi-armed entity playing an instrument with her legs folded. She has at least 3 heads we can see, and this battle chamber is brimming with a golden glow so beautiful you can feel the rich warmth on your skin. Once we enter the second phase of the fight, her bloody, beating heart is exposed, and the attacks ramp up with dense bullet fields popping into existence all around you. During stage 5, we enter a warped and ruined city, filled with floating rubble and energy streams exploding far below. One of my favorite enemy types in the whole game is the Red Lantern, only found in this level. These foes sway back and forth while spraying bullets and can very quickly squeeze you into dangerous situations if you're not paying attention. When reaching the final boss, we come to an untouched part of the city, but that won't remain the case for long unless we bring down this giant, long-necked monstrosity. She throws a lot our way during the first phase, and things only get more intense when the second half of the fight begins. At this point, she has aged quite a bit and has a long tongue stretching out. The tip of this unnatural tongue has a head growing with arms sticking out of the eye sockets. After bringing down this miserable, hideous wretch, the land is cleansed and peace is restored. But it's not just about the impressive artwork and creativity we see throughout the stages and boss fights. There's plenty to appreciate elsewhere, and this is where the presentation matches pace with Shikhondo's art style and theme. On the opening menu, we have an elegant flower-like layout with 7 layers moving in opposite directions. I sometimes sit between runs and listen to the music while watching these moving components. One menu transition I enjoy is when the sliding doors open before the character selection. It's such a simple animation, yet it sets a quiet, peaceful mood before plunging into the dangers ahead, almost like a samurai having tea the night before battle. I also really like the boss warning screen and the game's vertical side panels. All in all, Shikhondo's visual package is top tier and never ceases to amaze me. Even subtle details like your character's hair moving as you navigate the tormented skies has it feeling like you're actually flying through the air. Depending on the difficulty you're playing in, you can either be breezing through the game without issue or facing an immense bullet storm with compounding pressure the deeper you go. As this is a bullet hell, you'll of course be dealing with tons of enemy projectiles overlapping, spreading out, and everything else you're already used to facing. However, Shikhondo takes everything a step further with the sheer level of genius expressed through the boss attacks. How some of these patterns materialize is incredible enough, but when you witness the unexpected motion and behavior, you can't help but sincerely admire the thought and planning involved with these designs and how they relate to each boss. Sometimes an approaching bullet field will come to an abrupt stop before retracting or splitting into a completely different formation. Other times, jagged lines will chase you to one side of the screen before swinging back the other way. Meanwhile, you still need to dodge smaller bullets in between the open areas. You'll need to find safe spots within the spider's web or flower pattern unless you budget your soul gauge or fire off precious bombs. Needless to say, the list of fantastic attack behavior goes on. But there is one more aspect I want to talk about, and it's honestly one of my favorite things about the game's attacks: psychological manipulation. You won't see this everywhere you look, but there are times when an attack will demand your complete attention in one spot, and ever so subtly, sneak attack projectiles will materialize below, safely out of your peripheral vision, and slowly start creeping up toward you, often catching you completely off guard. At first, this may sound like a cheap shot, but when you think about the game's twisted theme, this is in perfect alignment with the nature of the bosses, drawing your attention one place before plunging a dagger in the back, or in other words, revealing their true intent through the use of a malicious surprise. Or, during other attacks, you'll encounter a row of darts that begins moving downward in unison. Then they suddenly make a slight adjustment to zero in on your position and narrow, making the space between each dart tighter. Meanwhile, you weigh whether to get close to charge your gauge or back away to maintain a safer distance and allow more time to think your way out. The way Shikhondo toys with your mind is nefarious, and I absolutely love it. I've never before felt this degree of manipulation in a bullet hell, so in my opinion it speaks volumes as to how deeply the theme runs. Scoring is another area offering a lot of room for exploration. As you can imagine, you receive points for killing enemies and collecting the souls that drop. The soul counter in the top right corner fills as souls are collected, and the higher you get this number, the more points you receive. When activating soul collect mode, the soul counter will double, so if you're playing for score, you'll want to be efficiently charging your gauge and firing that off as often as possible, especially during bullet-heavy sections. If triggering a second soul collect phase during the first, the soul counter will quadruple. Furthermore, each difficulty mode has a specific bonus. Easy mode is set to a 1000 times bonus, normal is times 2500, hard is times 5000, and extreme is times 8500. We also have the stage end bonus, where you can receive massive points. In a nutshell, the bonus calculates the total souls collected in the stage you just finished, multiplied by your remaining lives, multiplied by the relevant difficulty bonus, plus the stage's total score dumped on top. This can make for some huge totals. Believe it or not, I used to be completely turned off by the music in this game, not including the initial menu screen. For whatever reason, some songs felt harsh and out of place, but with a workaround for the movement bug allowing me to finally jump in and experience the game without issue, I have come to crave each next stage's music during my runs, even though I wouldn't necessarily listen to music like this outside of my playtime. The sound effects are another major appreciation point for me. I love the horrific boss screams, the explosion sounds, and even the destructive black energy when detonating a bomb. Shikhondo is not without some issues though. As for the movement bug I just mentioned, that's something I noticed the first time playing. For those unaware, your character's mobility will periodically lock up every so often, making it so that you can't move left or right for about 2 seconds. You can, however, still move vertically. One simple solution to this is playing with an arcade stick, as it completely removes the issue from the equation. I went years not touching this game because of how brutal it felt having your character freeze up every other moment. I want to sincerely thank Porchka66 for sharing this remedy. Without it, I would not have jumped back into Shikhondo, and this review would never have been created. Another issue I've noticed is the score counter. Typically, the right side will show your all-time score, and the left side will show your current score. The problem with the score counter is that it resets almost every single run. This personally isn't a huge deal for me, but it's something to be aware of if that's going to be a deal breaker for you. There have been some instances where my hardcore and boss rush mode high scores have remained, but on average they will reset. That being said, your leaderboard score will remain intact. And then we come to the leaderboard issue. Again, this doesn't matter so much, but it could mean more to others. The problem is that unless you open up the leaderboard before your run, it won't record your score. When I secured my first 1cc, I scored over 2 billion points, but because I hadn't opened up the leaderboard, my much lower previous score was the only one showing. Furthermore, I'm unable to scroll through to check where I'd actually rank since the score page limits your view. Despite these not being end-of-the-world issues for me, as I mainly care about being able to play, it'd still be nice getting a patch to resolve these things. In conclusion, Shikhondo is ridiculously underplayed and underrated. It may not be everyone's cup of tea, but there's an insane amount of depth to uncover for those willing to look beyond the surface. We have brilliant and beautiful transforming patterns to marvel at, a dark theme plunging us into a spiraling catastrophic nightmare, charming backdrops, music and sound effects that expand the overall experience, and tons of ways to play the game. For a game made by Toho fans, it's a marvelous and inspiring creation. On that note, Zune actually gave them permission to make derivative titles such as this. Shikhondo is a bullet hell filled with things to appreciate, and I deeply cherish it. Plus, with how I like to challenge myself, I won't be running out of things to do in this game anytime soon. And lastly, I think it would be incredible to see a second game with these two protagonists. It would be great to revisit the art style and theme, but with slight differences to the gameplay. New enemies and wicked bosses would be a supreme joy. Anyway, that's where I'm leaving off for now. Let me know in the comments if you have Shikhondo or aim to pick it up in the near future. Maybe you even stopped playing because of the movement issue, but have renewed excitement for jumping back in now that you know a workaround. Feel free to share all of that stuff down below. And if you enjoyed this video, please consider flinging a like our way and subscribe to keep your days STG infused. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.